Well, hello and welcome to Little State Big Voices with myself, Shahida, and my fabulous co-host, Tracy. How are you, ma'am?
Normally I would give a really cheerful "Hey y'all," but I'm struggling for cheer right now.
I'm
But
struggling.
I'm getting there.
I am struggling. It was a rough week. And it was a rough week. Tuesday, we all went through, the shock of our lives. I honestly didn't think I really thought it was going to be the other way around, that Kamala Harris was definitely going to blow him out the water. But I gotta say, first and foremost, I am extremely proud of Black women and Black men who stood out and came in support the only candidate that is worthy of the White House at this point. It was
Absolutely.
an emotional loss, and unfortunately, it opened up wounds that have never healed in this country. They've never been closed as it is. And now we are forced to deal with more hate and more bigotry towards our community, like on the level of Jim Crow. I don't know if you have read what middle school kids and college kids and high school kids kind of text and emails that they're getting. They had that already to go,
Mm-hmm. Queued up.
queued up to go, telling them that they would be recruited for the new slavery. And we're going to have to find a way to talk about this. I mean, we talked about sisterhood last week and how important that is. And it's even more important this week, just vital to us being able to maintain some type of peace, because we don't know what's coming for us specifically. We see it, but there could be so much more specifically from this administration. We already knew that, a good portion of Americans were vile and racist. And with the election of Trump, they feel so emboldened to really express that to us, how much they hate us. And it's something. It's unfortunate.
But to that point, guess who else is emboldened now?
Who?
All of us who have felt that letdown from Tuesday. We are all emboldened.
Yeah.
We have all been given our assignment, which is we are not going the fuck back. I'm not going back.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if you want to take me, you're going to have to take me kicking and screaming. So that's number one. Number two, we have to understand that and someone said this, I'm borrowing it and I'm paraphrasing. We went to bed and woke up in the same country. This is just the reflection of what has been simmering underneath the
Mm-hmm.
surface this whole time. So now the question is, what do we do? What do we do in while we still have democracy? What do we do? What are we in control of that we can handle? And what do we do politically? And I say we, but I really mean our Democratic Party. Stop playing checkers. It's time to play chess. These mofos been playing chess. I feel
Yeah.
like they had this queued up since the Obama administration.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is an overnight thing. This is
No,
something
it's
that
not.
has been brewing.
Mm-hmm.
But I will encourage everyone to lean into your resources. If you have health care of any kind, lean into your resources.
Yeah.
Talk to a professional, talk to a therapist. If your therapist is not giving you what you need, change your therapist and get a therapist that looks like you, that can understand your problems and your issues. We definitely have to take control of what we have the power to control.
Yeah. Yeah. We do. We do. And unfortunately, well, you know what? Tracy started off with the positivity of like we're leaning into ourselves. And I'm it'll take me a minute to get out of this slump, but they are not going to own me. They're not going to own my emotions, or how I feel about myself and my community. And it's always been from a sense of strength. I've always felt that our community is strong. I always felt the sisterhood, the brotherhood, all of it. And I'm not going to let anybody take that away. We've always thrived. I just thought that at this point in time that we could do more than just thrive. That we would have a great representation of us, not only to the United States, but to our children, the world. White supremacy, it thinks it wins, but it doesn't. It has never been able to keep us down. So that is our strength. So I'm very happy for that. And on that note, we have two very special guests with us today who are forming the Rhode Island African American Museum. And Tracy's just going to give a slight introduction before I bring them in.
Well, thank you very much for that intro. And I just want to add that the folks, like the people that we're about to speak to, are the people that are circumventing the book banning. They're circumventing the, let's rewrite history in a bad way. So without further ado, the founders of the African American Museum of Rhode Island, also known as the AAMRI, have created a unique model to empower youth in the community by connecting them to their histories and equipping them with workforce ready technical skills. So today with us, we're going to have Christopher West. He's the executive director, who's also a historian and an extensive curatorial moderator at the California African American Museum, as well as the Rhode Island Black History and Heritage Society. So he comes with this illustrious background. And over at the Rhode Island Black Heritage Society, he's highlighted the African diaspora narratives for extensive period of time, for years. And we also will be I can't even talk. I'm so like befuddled right now. But I'm gonna get it together. Don't you worry. Um one of their founders who will not be joining us is Helen Baskerville Dukes, but I wanted to, give her flowers. She's the executive director of the Mount Hope Community Center and board chair of the Juneteenth Rhode Island, which many of us have attended and enjoyed for several years now. And she brings with her 20 years of advocacy and expanding that particular festival and advancing sustainability in our community. We will also have Gloria Johnson with us. She's the Assistant Director of Loan Servicing at Rhode Island Housing. She comes with 25 years in that career of housing and risk management, and also experience with Youth Build Preparatory Academy. So she's got the experience with helping our youth to understand their narratives and to share them. And then together, these three people, they envision that the African American Museum of Rhode Island will become a living archive, which is what we need. We need to keep that griot spirit going. This is going to be a space where the community can connect to material for the culture and community memories. Again, sharing those memories, keeping them alive, and reimagining histories as well. So they're going to help amplify voices through digital and visual exhibits and inspire us through storytelling and community. Girl, I'm muddling my way through this, but these people are dynamic and I want to give them their just due. The end goal here, and one of the mottos of the museum, is that they want visitors to not only see themselves but be seen in these exhibits. So we will welcome Christopher and we will welcome Gloria.
So I think Gloria dropped off, but we will, without further ado, invite Dr. West in.
Okay.
Hello, Dr. West.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I am great. Welcome to Little State Big Voices. I saw that Gloria was in the back, and I'm going to let her in right now. Hi, Gloria.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Great. Well, we were just talking before.
Yes,
Thank you both very much for, joining us today. I think this is probably one of our most important times to have, curators of African American Museum on
right.
after such a heartbreaking week.
Yes, I agree. This is good timing.
Excellent. Unfortunately, we thought it would be, more exciting. I am really in my feelings today, but I'm going to try and bring in the chair. But, again, Dr. West and Gloria, thank you again for being here. And, just give us a little snippet on, what you're doing with the African American Museum. Tracy gave you a great intro that you will see and hear, but trust me, we hit all the great
Oh,
points.
nice. I'm gonna let Dr. West take the lead on that.
Okay, thank
Um,
you.
it begins with really brilliant community organizing. And I'm here because Helen Baskerville Dukes is deeply committed to this community. I worked at Brown University, and Wendy Wallace, who is in charge of community engagement at Brown, reached out to me. At that point, I was a curator at the John Hay Library working on mass incarceration. I was also working as the research director for the last couple of years at Rhode Black Heritage Society. Exhibits I've worked on include the most recent one, Gilded Age, which was at Rose Cliff in Newport.
We loved that. We were
It
there.
was it was a
Phenomenal.
I had the honor of serving as the chief curator, working with the Preservation Society of Newport County staff, and it's an opportunity to tell a good story. But it's a story. And what I mean by that, it's just a story, is what Helen talked about is that there is a loss of information in this community and that there is a need for, and I mean, from the minute that I've engaged with these community leaders, it's clear to me that all we're doing is follow the community lead. And I don't say that that's not performative. That's not just saying, it's not just something to do on Monday. It means literally, this is a community that knows that it needs to tell stories about itself. And the only thing that this museum is doing is following, making sure that those stories get told. I'll give you the one that is the most recent, which was Randall Ash. How is it that we have a brother who,
I'm just gonna change locations.
13, 13, is in the Celebrity Club in 1953 with one of the Osborne brothers? He's touring on the old Chitlin circuit in Montreal, Quebec, and Toronto. He comes back, he becomes part of a doo-wop group. From there, he continues his work and his effort. He's trained locally in both reed as well as drums. From there, he becomes the first music director for the Afro Art Center in 1970. He leads a group of women called the Revlons because he's their manager. He is the road manager for Rhythm. He does a TV show, which is going to be both for children as well as his own art variety show. Now, I told you everything about him. Now, I want you to just simply do a very simple Google search for Randall Ash, and nothing will come up. RandallashE. And so the people on the podcast, I want you to do that search and recognize that all the wonderful information I just told you about that individual will not show up. It will not be available. And for the last 15 years, he has been doing work volunteering at St. Martin de Porres Center. How do I know that? Because when I went in to meet, the sister at the front desk says, "Who are you here to see?" I said, "Here, I'm here to see Randall." "Well, sit down. He'll be here in 5 minutes." 7 individuals asked me as I was sitting there, "What am I there for?" I asked if I was there for Randall, and they all said, "Oh, Randall will be here in 5 minutes. Don't worry about it." It was a first name basis because they understood who he was. We want youth at Youth Build Preparatory Academy to interview him, to tell his story, and then to build a Wikipedia page. But we're not stopping there. We then want those same youth to advocate to rename Cranston Street Park in proximity to St. Martin de Porres after Randall Ash. It's appropriate. It's appropriate because we get to tell stories about our community. It's appropriate because we have a hero that's walking around in our midst, but we don't tell a story. It's appropriate that we can tell the story of 20th century rhythm and blues, music performance, and engagement and service to the community, and embodied in one individual. And that individual is still with us. And so we can't wait until those stories go away. We have to celebrate and elevate the individuals who, to this day, are doing the work necessary to make the difference. The museum is very simple: workforce development, empowering our youth, and paying them appropriately, and listen to their stories. It's not real complicated. That's who we are, and that's the museum at its core.
I had, mentioned a little bit to Shahida, and when I was doing your bios, I actually was talking about griots and about African oral history and African American oral history. That's one of the things I think that we've gotten too far away from. And I'm so happy that your museum is going to be able to encapsulate all of that information, because I think, especially with the advancement of technology, less conversations are being had, less one-on-one personal conversations are being had. So I think it's important for the youth and the community, especially the parents
Yes,
and those who influence youth, to be there and take regular visits to your museum so that they can see and they can internalize what African American history really
and I
is.
want to be clear. So, when there's a conceptualization of the museum, there is typically a location in which there are physical objects that have been preserved and interpreted by curators. We are going to get to that place, but those objects are going to be interpreted by youth. Those physical metadata records are going to be interpreted by youth. We're going to start with an object. In this case, I'll give you an example. It's a Grafton saxophone. It's produced in England in the 1960s. Its most famous players are Ornette Coleman. Randall Ash has a one. And so we are going to take this object, incredibly performant saxophone. He's a saxophone player himself. He will tell us something about that saxophone. And then we're going to conserve it. We're going to preserve it. And it becomes foundational. But the object, when it is interpreted by youth, doesn't just simply sit gathering dust in a bin, because I want those youth to then turn it into social media that can then be shared, so that I want you as a 17-year-old to tell that story. And I want you to recognize that in 30 years, you're going to come back and your story about Randall Ash, the question that you asked, is now part of a permanent record. It's part of a public humanities record that another generation can say, and that you can say that the work that I did helped to preserve for generations the story of Randall Ash. That's empowering. But we're not just doing it to be empowerment. We want to give you technical skills that you can then apply moving forward. That little media piece becomes part of your portfolio. And so if you're looking to be an influencer or marketing or welder or all the industries that we know by 2013 are going to be ones where there's some high demand, but also offer a living wage. We want to offer you the ability to work on your technical skills, work on your acumen, get your portfolio together. We want that object, and we're going to hold on to that object and tell stories about it. That's the foundation of our museum. But our goal is not to have an object that we're going to preserve. Our goal is to empower youth. Our goal is to transmit information. Our goal is for them to do a whole history. Our goal is for them to have the skills necessary so that at the age of 30, 35, 40, 45, as they move through their life cycle, that they always will have those skills and they can always use those skills. You can never take away from them the knowledge and skills that they have acquired in engagement with elders in our community. You can never take those away.
Thank you. That's very interesting. So, and one of the things I did want to talk about was specifically the youth, because I feel like too many of us have not taught this last generation about African American history. I'm a child of the 70s. And one of the things I find most empowering about my mother and her friends is that I went to a Catholic school, but it was an Afrocentric Catholic school in Boston during the time of like busing and everything. So I did learn Black history in my school, but also my mother and her friends took it upon themselves. Every Saturday, we had Black history class. And it was not something that I appreciated until I was older, because it was a group of Black women
Mm,
getting
mm,
together every weekend. Each one would take a
mm,
weekend. So one weekend would be my mother, the next one, and we would learn about, all the, great history moments, characters, from Harriet Tubman to Frederick Douglass. We had to memorize speeches. I mean, and these are just housewives. Or, or they were, working out. They took it upon themselves. And so when I hear you talk about the youth, I want to, Tracey and I are from Boston originally. And so we don't know all the history, in Rhode Island when it comes to Black history, but we're here now. And one of the things we talked about is that, how do we get involved in something like what you're doing, Gloria, what you're doing? And I appreciate, the work, but I feel like as a grandmother now, but as our generation now, we have to work extremely hard to make sure our kids know who they are so they don't get swept up in this idea of white supremacy and feel like they are not enough.
Well, for me, that was one of the when Helen sort of recruited me
Mm.
to be on the board, and we talked. And I know Helen a really long time, and we talk a lot about our young people, particularly in Providence, young Black people who just seem extraordinarily lost. They're involved in these violent lifestyles, and they don't have a strong sense of self. They don't know where they come from, who they're connected to, and because of that, they sort of turn to these really negative life choices. And that for me, when Dr. West talks about the youth and connecting them to that for me is the most important part. Because we can't do anything about the past, but we can now get these young people involved, connect them to these stories, whether it's their family or somebody else's family, and get them to tell the stories. So they're invested, and then they're learning and they understanding where they come from, and that we are strong people. We deserve dignity and respect, and you need to treat yourself with dignity and respect. And maybe that'll also help them make better choices for their lives moving forward.
Yeah.
I like the idea that you are allowing them to incorporate the things that appeal to younger generations, such as social media. So
Mhm.
I'm glad that you're finding a way to incorporate that along with the knowledge and the history and things like that. So if someone wanted to experience the museum this month, what could they expect and how would they go about doing that?
Well, the one event that we are working on currently is an interview done by Youth Build Prep Academy of Randall Ash in preparation for the Wikipedia, and we just met with Risley because we also want to establish a partnership in which, again, so we will have an event. It will be in the next week to week and a half. We will make it available. We will share it on social media for folks to attend. What you will be watching will be Randall Ash on stage and cohorts of youth, 6 total. We have done a prep session in which they have done the national biography of Randall Ash. They'll have an image that we're going to use, and so it'll be an image of Randall Ash at age 15 playing in a club in Montreal. The newspapers in French, and we'll have the students ask, how did you get here? What am I looking at? And what's here? There'll be another image of the Revlons, 1970. Randall is their manager, and it's the 3 of them, and he's stationed them in a tree. The garb is clearly from the 1970s, early 1970s, and ask him, these were women who moved from Georgia, and talk about, what did you see? What about this career? What was important? Randall Ash was also an actor, and he did a number of performances with the Providence Playhouse, including Native Son. And so talk about, how does acting for you express the things that you thought were important? So, and these are youth asking those questions. These aren't the curators. These aren't the oral historians. These are youth who have been prepared, and we're not patting on the hat. These are going to get the opportunity to tell a story. Because when I said to them, you're going to meet this guy, they're like, wait a minute, what? I'm like, yes, not only do I want you to meet this man, I want you to be able to ask him questions and share his story. And then I want you to share the story about him. And they're into that. And they're into that because they recognize that it's important. They recognize that those stories are going to matter. And they recognize that when they tell those stories, it's going to be part of a permanent record, which means that their lives, their analysis, their history, and their knowledge is going to be part of a permanent record. And they're raised to that. The problem is that we don't basically believe in them. We don't love on them. We don't expect excellence from them. And we don't believe excellence can follow. I'll give you a quick story about Youth Build Prep Academy about why I believe in this so much. I'm doing a session on the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, established by Bobby and Huey in October of 1966. But I gave the backstory to that, including the 10th Division that Jackie Robinson was a part of, and then the Lowndes County Black Party. Now, the young kids weren't interested in that. They wanted to do film analysis of Black Panther 2. Young brother in the corner says, that movie was trash. Two other brothers said, no, the movie was good. I stopped the curriculum because they began over the next 45-minute scene film analysis. Well, what about when this happened? And the brother's like, no. Now, they're not looking at a tablet. There's no video reference. They are using visual text analysis, and they are trying to convince this brother that his analysis of that particular film is wrong. They try 4 different times during the 45 minutes, and eventually at the end, he goes to a particular scene. He says, look. So he goes to his boy, they talk a little bit, and they say, what about this scene? So he thinks about it for a little bit, and he's like, all right, yeah, I can see that. And then he talks about why he could see that. Now, these are the same youth that roll around in Providence that nobody wants to talk to. But they're doing graduate level film analysis. There's no, let me say again, there's no video near them. There's no tablet. They are all referencing a common set of material that they know and understand and that they can analyze, and they're not looking at anything. That's what my belief is. That's why I'm good. That's why I know that what we're doing is going to work.
It's very interesting because you think more of it of a museum in the traditional
Yes, ma'am.
sense, and this is very untraditional. And I'm thinking like, so when and it's great to have somebody that's actually part of the living history. So are you going by different genres of African American history from here in Rhode Island? Or I mean, how are you pulling this all together? Whereas, especially the youth, but older people too, because they don't know. I don't know, all of the Black history in Rhode Island, where you're pulling it all together, where I can not only see but participate in it.
There's 3 pipelines. One is the traditional one, which is collectors of African American ephemera and memorabilia. We have one locally here, Ona Moniz Johnson. And so a physical museum would be in collaboration with the life story that she's given, which is hundreds to thousands of objects that are connected into telling the African American story and the African diasporic story. So that's one strand. So we know that in the long term, capital campaign, it's a Rust Belt city, so property is not the problem. It's renovating the problem, or it's going to be the cost, and then the overhead of actually administrating and running and keeping it open. So consider that a strand by which that we know it's important. The second strand is the generation. So keep in mind, African diasporic experiences in Rhode Island are extraordinarily different and unique. They are Liberian, they're Cape Verdean, they're Afro-Caribbean. We can see that in the leadership, we can see how it manifests, which means that when you're talking about the African diasporic experience in the 20th century, you're automatically global. You're automatically on the continent. You're automatically in the Caribbean. And so if we understand that to be true, how we help them to understand that is that those families brought materials, ephemera, images, photographs, and when those older pass away, die, if we remove those objects and we put them in the trash and we throw them in the dumpster, that we don't preserve them, then that global history of African diasporic communities is trashed as well. So the second thing that we're going to do is try to empower people to preserve their history. Meaning the same things that we see like in Shades of LA and Los Angeles with the National Museum, those initiatives, which is how do we help to empower you to give you information to preserve, which is if you're listening to this podcast, please, after it is over, please turn off the TV. Please grab your iPhone. Please sit next down to your granny or your mom or your auntie, whoever it is, and just ask a question. Tell me about where you were born, and then just listen. It's more entertainment, there's more content than whatever's going to happen on that TV. If you're interested in being an influencer, the person who's going to give you more information in which you can open your world has been sitting next to you for 15 years. You just got to turn on TV, off the TV, and turn on and listen. If we do that part, then we're going to help. The last part is about changing the physical landscape, which means that we know that those people of African diasporic experience contribute the Bill of Taylor parks that are out there. But there are more than that. And we want that as a youth is moving through this city, that they're going to see wayfinding signage that identifies appropriately, with meaning, and with dignity the stories of those folks who arrived and gave influence to this city. I'll give you one example. The ethos and culture of this city is connected into the Italian experience, Bloody Decency, and it's sort of the backstory of the city. But do you recognize that the first person who ran the numbers game with Author Daddy Black, who was also an owner of Negro League integrated baseball teams? Do you recognize that one of the original people who was a part of that illicit trade, shall we say, was trained by Author Daddy Black? Do you realize the Providence Journal in 1932 ran a story about it called the Nigger Pool? Do you realize that what Author Daddy Black did and what distinguished him is because he recognized that the numbers game that he was running was better than everybody else because his payoff was better? And do you realize that in 1932, when he was killed upon the word of the New York Mafia to allow for the Italian Mafia to then grow? So your narrative that defines Providence as a mafia town has to start with a black man. Now watch all your
And
now
it's
watch all your heads, watch your reaction, watch your body, and it's not to glamorize the life. It's to recognize
Mhm.
that you have a Bumpy Johnson here. You don't have to go see it in cinema. That the narrative structure of a black man recognizing, oh, did I say he was a World War I veteran? I probably should have said that as well. Do you see how this all plays out? Why we tell that story? Why isn't that man being recognized? Why aren't we saying that this is a story? This is not about glory or infamy, but if young cats actually want to see an old head that they're like, okay, how did he do that? It's because his numbers were tied to player. It's because his intelligence was tied to player. It's because he had a diversified economic base. You know, the things you're trying to do, he's already doing that. Does that make sense to folks?
So I love to hear this from you, and it what it brings back to me is a visit that I made to the State House one day to get some paperwork. That I was just going to a random office, and actually not in the State House, in City Hall, and there were display cases full of African American history and queer African American history, and I just happened to be kind of waiting, so I was able to peruse, and they're just sitting there.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people don't even realize that African American and African diasporic history is sitting right here under our
Yes,
noses
ma'am.
in the most common of places and public of places. But you did say something else that really resonated with me. And it's that, it's those untold stories and the root of a lot of these things that have become Hollywood fodder, but really the real story goes untold. So I'm excited about what you're doing, and I'm excited to learn more about Randall Ash now that you said it. And I'm interested to know too, will you be working on more Wikipedia pages? Will you all be sourcing for this type of work to get the information out there and these wiki pages made?
We want to do a Wikipedia. So to me, it's a public humanities approach. And so public humanities approach does two things. One, it is a permanent record, and the reason for Wikipedia is to offer to the general public information that they can consume globally. So we're following with that original intent. Two, it means that in 5, 10, or 15 years, if you're the young person who contributed to that, you can always go back that and see the information. And three, how do Generation Alpha and Generation X generate information? They're probably doing Wikipedia searches. And so I want to give them access to information in the ways that they want to acquire that information. And so the social media packages that are done by the students are curated by the students with a very intended micro audience, which is, would your boy watch this? No? Then why are we doing it? So do something that your boy was scrolling, he'd be like, okay, I'm gonna scroll on that. That's all I want. It's not complicated. I just want your boy to want to scroll on that. So you design it. I'm not going to be the one to tell you I got gray hair. I'm, crutch life. I'm old. Like, I'm not the one that's going to do that for you. But I want to give you enough information, knowledge, and skills that not only do you get the imprimatur of museums, which is, any museum does it, it's the last institution in the United States society that people trust what it says. I need you to hear that. It's the last institution in the United States society that people trust what it says. Museums are the last place where we suspend judgment because we believe that the research that is going into that is worthy of slowing down and taking time. And if young people can provide that, in which folks are going to have to slow down and take time, and it's done extraordinarily well, and they're proud of it, they will carry that for the rest of their life cycle. We know that, for example, with Marcus Garvey, UNIA folks, for the remainder of their life cycle, when they got interviewed in their 70s and 80s, what they talk about? The pride of UNIA. And so if we can do that, if we can instill that pride and skill and acumen and get them paid, then we've done what we're supposed to do. Because that's all it's about. It's about doing what we're supposed to do.
I read in your bio that you worked with the Rhode Island Heritage
Rhode and
Society.
Black
And
Heritage
I
Society.
remember
Yes, ma'am.
when that was at the arcade
Yes, ma'am.
years ago, my daughter used to intern there. And I remember she did a presentation, and it was on a particular slit, and I looked for her information and I couldn't find it. But and it was a very small, small space that they had for, a few years, but I was extremely impressed because I'd never seen anything like that in Boston. And so when I heard and when I saw that you were a part of this, will you be incorporating some of that history from, that society into this, because I thought it was unique that the young people that were working with the Heritage Society at that point were doing all of these presentations, and they were reaching out to the Met School and their parents, and they were and just teaching us about the history of Rhode Island that went back before slavery.
Um, no, I mean, I think that a few things. There are multiple organizations that are out there trying to tell stories about African heritage life, and I applaud and support all of them. The origin story for the Rhode Island Black Heritage Society is 50 years old. It starts with Rowena Stewart. It is a collection of African American business, social, political elites who had either been working in NAACP or Urban League, and they took their papers and they wanted to make sure that they got preserved. And that's the origin of the organization. Its current leadership under the executive director, Sonny Stokes, is moving in the direction with Birthright RI in terms of telling stories. They're currently located at Building 8 on the Rhode Island College. At the time that your daughter was a member of that, the person who was in charge was Ray Rickman. Ray Rickman is now in charge of an organization called Stages of Freedom. Both of these institutions are doing and have done extraordinarily good work of preserving and interpreting and telling those stories. I'm new to Rhode Island. I got here August 8th of 2022 and had the honor of both working with the Stokes on more than a few exhibits, including A Matter of Truth, which is their sort of comprehensive story about civil rights in the state that we put in the State House, as well as, again, as I talked about, the Gilded Age. And so working with those organizations gave me, as an historian, the content to understand. And also, I am an LA dude. It's a very traditional migratory pattern. And so what I had to learn about Rhode Island is you can't do Rhode Island without saying African diasporic experiences for a few reasons. One, the intermeshing of indigenous and African heritage in Rhode Island means that you can never separate those stories out. You cannot take an African heritage story in Rhode Island and not talk about the indigenous. You can't do it. So that's where you have to start. You have to recognize that you're always going to be global. You also have to recognize that you don't have the migratory patterns of African Americans domestic, which are typically during two time periods, 1900 to 1940. right? What you have is ongoing migratory flows in which you've got people who were their mom or their grandmother was born in Cape Verde and they go back. And you've got migratory patterns of cousins that are coming in. You're talking about Liberian communities that are back and forth, Nigerian communities that are back and forth, and so Afro-Caribbean. And so it's a very different flow in terms of information coming back and forth. And as a result, you need to be cognizant that the young person in front of you, their aunt might have just gotten back from Cape Verde. And so that culture isn't stagnant, it isn't stationary, it isn't generations removed. It's something that they're getting a taste and a flavor of, which makes telling the story of African heritage in Rhode extraordinarily difficult, complicated, and global. And so, of course, you need multiple organizations to tell those stories. Our focus is primarily the 20th century, and our focus is on the generations that have arrived post-World War II, because we believe strongly that those particular stories have not been preserved and have not been told, and that second, those 1.5 and 2 and third generation who just talked about globally need to hear that, because their parents, when they arrived into Providence, typically moved into what would be identified as Black residential and commercial spaces. And so we are interested in the imprinture of Blackness influenced by global culture, Black influence influenced by Black migratory patterns, and recognizing that served as the hub for folks. It is interpreted different in a Liberian household. It is interpreted different in a Nigerian household. It is interpreted different in a Cape Verdean household. But that core is still going to be the expression of Blackness, because we know Blackness globally is consumed and is understood. We also know that the way that Black folk operate is, come on in here, have a seat, ain't nobody in our family. And that, I think, is what folks react and responded to, because our board reflects that. Our board is that diasporic communities who said, I came here, but my mother interacted with Black folks because that's where I found home. So that's the story that we're very specifically trying to tell. And we think that niche has not been told. We are not looking, nor do we have any interest in being in competition with our sister organizations. We just simply believe that this niche is an important niche and we want to tell it. We want to empower youth in telling it. Nothing complicated.
That resonates deeply with me. It does. So I'm a Black woman. It's easy to look at me and see that, but my family immigrated from
There we
Honduras.
go.
My parents themselves. So I am first generation American. And I do believe that, growing up, we're Gen X, and we were told, melting pot. And we're getting away from melting pot. Now we are everyone stand on your own in this gumbo, is kind of the metaphor that I've heard most recently. But it's less focus on assimilation and more focus on highlighting your differences, which, is going to be important, especially for these young people who, like you said, are either first or 1.5 or second generation into the United States. And I think it's important for the overall Black Americans who have been here since, prior to World War II, to understand that we do have those commonalities and we respect those commonalities,
Yeah.
but we also appreciate our differences, although we just got dropped off by a different boat in a different
You need to
place.
stop.
I get that.
I hear you. And I think Blackness change, and I think that the benefit of, and I want you to actually hear this, I'm going to say it slowly, the benefit of the Harris presidency campaign and candidacy normalizing that Blackness is a foundational core for her identity, but that her ethnic identity ranged throughout the globe, but that she centralized who she was and said, I am a Black woman. Now, all y'all lost your mind, and I know that confused you, and I get that, because I know what you see us as. But that, to me, is an opening moving forward, because it allows the possibility of, well, wait a minute, but I thought she was, but I thought her mama was, but no, she sees herself as Blackness unapologetically. That's an opening. That's an opportunity. That's a space for a conversation. I'm less interested in what happened in Madison Square Garden, and I'm more interested by what happened in Iowa with somebody having to hear that. I'm more interested in the young girl of color who's now going to research and try to understand what did she mean when she says she's Black and looks that way. Those are the things I'm interested in. I think the negativity and the darkness, that will always be there. That will always pass, and it will never resonate because darkness will not resonate in that way. It will triumph in its own way because it is darkness, but it will not resonate. And those are not the same things. And our youth will resonate with stories that will move them. Our youth will resonate those stories and empower them. And if we give them something that will help them to resonate and see the lightness in each of them individually, then they won't be caught up in that darkness.
Very interesting. Gloria, you've been quiet.
I mean, I could listen to Dr. West all day, but
I see
yeah.
you're enthralled just like us, but
And I just want to like touch upon about
Mhm.
when they're talking about the people, Black Americans, migrating. So, like my family, for example, my mom, who's still living, is 88 years old,
Yeah.
and her family moved from North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, Wilson, North Carolina, in 1941. They came to Providence. But a couple of my grandfather's brother was already here. They moved here like in the late 30s because it's sort of that time they're migrating for jobs and things like that. And I, even like when I'm riding around in a car with my mom, we're riding through Providence, she talks about what the city looked like, was like when she was a little girl. When everybody's talking about, the new Urban League building over there on Prairie Avenue, what they want to do with that space. And she would tell us about how it used to be a shopping mall there. They had a market, they had like a resource center, they had a bar, they had all these things. And one of my grandfather's brothers managed the meat market there, and people were really the Black people there. And it was a very, back in the 40s and the 50s, there was a lot of Jewish people that also lived in South Providence. And so they developed this relationship, and just hearing her tell the stories, even just riding around Providence, like I'm at my sister's house right now. She lives in Wiggins Village, which is off Bridgham, Cranston, Westminster. And she talks about the buildings that were here, what they looked like before. And back in like the mid 60s, my grandparents' church was over on Knight Street in Federal Hill, and it was bombed. And it was called Holy Cross Church of God in Christ. And it was bombed by some racists, and that was my grandparents' church. And she talks about that time, remembering when that happened, and how they had to relocate the church to Broad Street in South Providence. And I always think about what a blessing it is to be able to hear my mom and some of my older relatives talk about the time in which they lived, right? These are not like things like, this is firsthand accounts of their lives as Black people in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and what it was like here in Rhode Island. It is funny, she said, when she got married in 1954, she moved to Georgia with her husband. And even though, we all know races are everywhere, we're not saying that's not the case, but she said when she moved from Rhode Island to Georgia, it was so stark, the difference. Because when she was a teenager here in Rhode Island, she didn't have to sit at the back of the bus. She didn't. That wasn't a thing. And when she went to Georgia, that was the thing. She felt like she had more of a community here as a Black person than down there, because everybody there was so fearful. Like my mother was always been a very kind of a hot-tempered person, and when she went to Georgia and they were telling her, you can't sit at this counter, she would like start going off on these white people, and her in-laws were like, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. Mm-hmm. So they will come to your house and drag you out of your house tonight.
Yes, they will.
So hearing those stories, and I think people need to hear those stories. Young people need to hear these stories, and because I feel like a lot of young people, especially, they sort of glamorize the sort of violence or sort of thing that's happening in our nation right now, and they don't really take these things really seriously because they're not connected to any of it in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Not through their parents, their grandparents, any of that stuff. And I think it's important for this museum is going to be able to connect these young people to who they are, what was happening then, and what is happening now. And I think that's really, really important that that happens like yesterday.
And I love the story, the fact that you're getting this from your mother. You're getting that oral history
Yeah.
from your mother. My mother right now is in the process of also kind of documenting, stories she heard from her great grandmother and her grandmother and her mother about our migration, my family's migration from St. Louis, Missouri to here, to Boston, actually. And I feel like when I hear the stories, just like you do, and you hear what this is just a generation ago or
Yeah.
two generations
Yeah.
ago, how it makes me feel so connected,
Yes.
but also so proud of what people have done.
Yeah.
And that's what I want I want my grandchildren to feel
That's
that way.
right.
I think I did a pretty good job of teaching my children about their history, because I know that they weren't getting it at North Providence High School. They were not getting it at the Met. They got tidbits, and I feel like it's been watered down. And I feel a lot of where we are today with our youth is because, unfortunately, we did not do our job
Right.
as far as keeping those stories
Right.
and telling them without watering them
Right.
down.
Right.
We needed to keep it absolutely 100 with our kids, because they don't understand how great what greatness that they actually possess. People would not always be trying to put you down if there was not some greatness about it. If you were really the thug, if you were really just, the
Yeah.
welfare queen and all these
Yeah.
things, people would pay you no attention. You would
Right.
not be a threat, but you were so much more than that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we have let them down. And I'm so incredibly proud that you guys are doing this and getting the youth involved in it. And I would really love for you to tell our audience, how they can help you, how they can reach out to you guys and help, as well as myself and Tracey.
The website, I mean, everybody has their website. aam-ri.org is the website. We lay it out in a project-based approach. So the first one is Camp Stories, which is telling the stories about 6 individuals that are in and around the Camp Street community and the Mount Hope Community Center. There's another one, which is another project, which is around nurses. There's a 100-year-old nurse who was working in World War II, segregated military. And that's emblematic of the story of Black women who pursued their education in the southern part of the United States, migrated to Providence and Boston, but in Providence served primarily as healthcare workers. And now they're in assisted living facilities or having their families take care of them. But those stories of their support and the thing that comes to us is, and the reason why, again, I talk about that this institution exists because it's following the community, is because a board member said, I have a network of 15 women. I'm waiting for you to do their oral histories. I need you to hear that. So when you are funding us, you are funding a young person to go to do that oral history. That's what we're doing. It's not really complicated. There's no, that is where that money is going to. The last one is going to be the Randall Lash piece that I talked about. And if you're interested in the capital campaign, it's the Owen Lemonese Johnson, that means you've got to do provenance on individual objects. We need to have to tell a story. We have to figure out how to preserve it. Blah, blah. So if you're interested in, I want to help your capital campaign. I want to help that vision of a museum. That's what it is, because it's based upon real objects connected into a collector that we want to help to preserve and interpret. Again, it's a museum that's built upon the actual needs and desires of the community, not because there's a need to have a building. And when you reorient the reason for the institution, then your support is, I want to, some of it's money, but some of it is going to be, we know these young people need literacy wraparound skills. We know that they need workforce development. And so we can't put them out there without recognizing that the systems that are in place haven't done that. So we think about a place like Youth Build Prep Academy. If you want to help to support us, support Youth Build Prep Academy, because that institution is doing that work as well. But contact us. I'm available. We contact us. Let's just start there. And it's
And where can we find you all on social media?
and on Instagram we have our God, I forgot what the account is. The account is on Instagram. I run the Instagram account. I should know what the account name is. It's horrible. It's AAN Museum RI. AA Museum RI, which is the African American Museum of Rhode Island RI.
Excellent. That reminds me of the upcoming film, The 6888. Most of us have never heard of the 6888 until Tyler Perry gave some exposure to that infantry, that unit from World War II, of these courageous black male professionals, soldiers, really, who helped get correspondence going and really maintain the morale during, the most difficult time of World War II. So, and many of those women are still alive in their hundreds. And had they not been talking about this, had someone not taken the time to listen and say, this, the world needs to know about this, I just envision that some of these stories that are going to come from your center, from your museum, are going to hopefully someday hit the masses and go beyond Rhode Island. That's my hope for
The
you.
author Daddy Black, somebody, what I want to do for these young folks is to say, look, somebody's going to make a movie on author Daddy Black. Do you want to be the executive producer for it, or do you want to buy a ticket?
Mm,
Mm,
Somebody's going to make that
that's
movie.
a word.
You want to be the
yes.
executive
I was
producer, or do you
Yes.
want to buy a ticket? I want you to be the producer on it. I want you to be the star. I want you to help your boy to be a grip on a grip. I want you to recognize that story, everything now is driven by great content. The content within African heritage communities is trillions of bytes of information rich. That's where you need to be spending your time.
Yeah.
Because we make the
Yes,
culture.
ma'am.
We are the
We
culture of
are
this
we
country.
are the culture.
Yes,
yes.
The
ma'am.
culture of this country.
We are.
And when we separate ourselves,
Yeah.
they come and get us.
Yes.
They come and get us. So our time is about up, but I need you guys to leave us with something inspiring, what it is that you love about Rhode Island, what needs to be fixed, and just something about the museum just to close us out.
Gloria, that's you.
Ooh. Oh boy. I would just, say in light of everything that's happened in the last few days, as you had said, Sheeta, you're in your feelings.
My feelings
I've been
hurt.
struggling all week.
Hmm.
But I would say to folks who are struggling, um, find your community, stay in your community, be with people who love and support you. We as Black people, I think we are some of the most amazing race of people on this. We are persevered through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of torture, and we come out and we're amazing and we're smart and we're joyful and we're loving. And I think we should not forget that. I know it's tough right now. I know it's really hard, but we have to stay in community with each other and love on each other.
Great advice.
What about you, Tracy, and then Dr. West?
Oh, I'm in
Yes,
this?
ma'am.
Yes,
You
you
in?
are.
What was the question? A word of encouragement. So a word of encouragement from me is, so Monday night about about 3 p.m. I shut all my social media off. I turned off my notifications and I only allowed for calls from my kids, my husband, and my mom to come through. And I self-reflected. And it
Mm,
had been a long time since I had been alone with my own thoughts, with no distraction, no TV, no internet, what have you. I went to bed with the intention of whatever happened overnight, I was going to get up, get out of bed, and keep my routine. And what I realized the minute I opened my eyes on Tuesday morning, before I looked for any results or anything, was that the sun was still there. And that sun's going to keep rising every single day for 4 years and beyond those 4 years, for infinity, probably. So just my thing is, like, every time you wake up in the morning and your eyes meet the sun, or the sun is coming up, understand that that's a new day and a new opportunity for
yeah.
you to just embrace controlling what you can control and taking charge of that in your life. That's all I got right now.
It's excellent. I love it.
Thank you.
Dr. West, who has been inspiring us the whole time, but you
Yes,
know,
Yes.
yes.
The internal polling by the Trump campaign relatively early on, and even after the removal of Biden and the elevation of Kamala Harris into the candidacy, was pretty consistent that he would likely win the election and win well. And I say that for the following. It means that the choices that he made to demonize his opponent, he wasn't John McCain, in which there was a constituent who made a disparaging remark about then Barack Obama. McCain took the mic back and said, "No, ma'am, no, ma'am. This is a good man. We simply disagree." And this isn't about discouragement. This is what I love about what we are going to move into, is that we have seen Black folks at our most creative in the middle of when it is the most horrific. And we good now because we clear. I need you to hear me.
Yes.
We good now because we're clear.
We are clear. Yes.
We're good now because we're clear. So we ain't got to pretend no more. I'm good. I am good with America now because I'm
Yep.
clear. We ain't gonna
Yep.
pretend anymore.
And we can make some solid decisions.
Yes.
I'm voting with my wallet for the next 4 years. And what that means
Yes.
is I don't care how cute your craft table is. I was at an event last night. I don't care how cute your craft table is. Your energy is giving me that you're not here for me. Therefore, I'm voting with my wallet and I'm taking it over here to a business that I know holds the same values and ideals as myself. So now we're going to really start hitting them in the pocket. And that's going to be the
Yep.
next phase of this,
I
is that,
like it.
cancel XYZ corporation, stop shopping with XYZ corporation, and pour your dollars, funnel them into where they should be going, like the African American Museum of Rhode Island.
Absolutely.
That's it. AAMRI.org.
Absolutely.
And what I want to just add to that, before we close out, is at home, get to teaching your children their self-worth, because these people are coming for them hard. We
Yeah.
just talked about that email that was sent out about, signing up for slavery again.
Mhm.
They need to understand
Yeah.
that some people are not rooting for you.
Yep.
And then some of the people that you say are your friends,
Yep.
they're not rooting for you. So we need to make them strong, and we need to give them a place where they are consistently loved. We need to be hugging on them. We need to be kissing on them. They need to feel Black love from every
Yes.
one of us, not just our own families,
Yep.
but I need to be hugging on your kids. You need to be hugging on my kids.
Yep.
We need to express the absolute love and admiration that we have for each other. You see a Black man walking down the street, hello, how you doing? You see a
Absolutely.
Black woman walking down the street, hello, how you doing? We need to be reaching out to each other.
Yeah.
That
All of
because
that.
that's all we got. That's
All of
all
that.
we got. And like Dr. West just said, we clear.
I'm good. I'm clear.
We are
Yes.
clear. We are clear on what we see now.
Yes. Yes.
You won't get us a fourth time.
Nah.
You won't get us a fourth time.
Yes.
So with that, I am gonna thank you both for being here with us. This was, very inspiring, inspirational, educational. I really appreciate it that you joined us today, and we hope to visit,
Mhm.
to go on your website, learn more about it, and then also help and work with you guys.
Appreciate you.
Absolutely. We'll be in touch. We want to do some volunteering if possible.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you.
And thank you guys so much.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
Good
evening.
night.
Be well.